Thanks everybody for joining us. We are now doing three of these meetups on Zoom every week, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And every Saturday starting today, Josh will join us for a meetup on psychology. I think we're all going to need it while we're locked up at home and trying not to go crazy. Um, and some of our upcoming meetups. So 2 days from now on Monday, Nikos and Brendan O'Neill will join us for a discussion on is tyranny here? Is the title. I was originally thinking, is tyranny coming? But then some measures were enacted, and I decided to change the title for that. And next Saturday, for Josh's next event, he'll be joined by YouTube sensation Raka Ali, and we'll discuss how we can use humor to cope in such situations. For everybody here joining us live on Zoom, if you can't join any of the upcoming calls, but you're interested in seeing them, they will be on. All of them will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So I encourage those of you who are not subscribed to subscribe. There's already a lot of great content there, and there's going to be more. So I'll post the link in the chat now. And for anybody watching on YouTube, if you want to join us live, you should sign up to the London Ayn Rand meetup. By the way, those of you outside London, I posted this event on a few other meetups, but I encourage you to join the London one. I can't guarantee that I'll post every one of the events on every meetup. And yeah, I will pass it on to Josh now.
So I thought a really good place to start today would be just to discuss the concept of resilience. I think this is what a lot of people are going to need to get through the lockdown, particularly in relation to the fact that we don't really have an end point. And I think that is what is I'm noticing from talking with my clients this week. That's what's getting people down the most. If we knew that it was going to be over in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, people feel that they can think that they can plan for that. But the kind of insecurity around that is what's causing a lot of people to experience quite depressive symptoms. Now, resilience in sort of psychological terms is often referred to as the ability to draw upon internal and external resources. And that's really what a lot of the work I've been doing with people this week is just helping people to identify what resources they can draw upon just to get through. I mean, for example, for me, so last week, yeah, I've been back over a week now, but the week about 10 days ago, I was out in Morocco facilitating a retreat, and on day 3 we got an announcement that Morocco is closing all its borders and we all had to get out. And so I was out there with my partner Christina and responsible for 7 people who were with us. And I really had to draw upon all these things that I'm going to talk about today because they really work. And I have to say, it's probably one of the most stressful things that I've ever been through. We had a situation where we had 7 people on one flight and 2 people on another flight, and then one flight was cancelled and the next flight was cancelled, and the client group were people with PTSD symptoms, and you can just imagine that it was not exactly ideal. And we had a British consulate that was feeding us information that was constantly being contradicted by the airlines, and it turned out that the airlines were right every time and the consulate was wrong. Anyway, I had to draw upon many internal and external resources, and what I thought would be cool to do today would just first of all, I'll just share something with you. What is resilience? And there's sort of kind of generic definitions of, like, resilience is learning to bend, not break when times are tough. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. Resilience is the ability to draw upon internal and external resources. And resilience is the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of challenge, stress, and adversity. Well, I think it's fair to say right now that that's what we're going through, because My, just to give you some self-disclosure, my partner is a doctor. She's going to be on the front line in Norway. As you've seen from the reports with COVID, it seems that there seems to be a viral load aspect to it, and people working in medicine are being struck down pretty harshly by the virus. My so we're apart. Live in a tiny place, and I'm concerned for her, and I'm also like going a little bit stir crazy at home. So I thought I would just share some examples of what we mean by external resources. And so what I've been drawing upon is I've actually got a friendship group. So, I've decided to sort of identify 3, 4, 5 key people in my life who I really value. And we're checking in with each other each day. And that's, or every other day, etc. But that's been really valuable because I've often been able to laugh and just check that, it's nice to be loved and to love. There's no question about that. And it's really made me focus on the people that I really do want to talk to, as opposed to the people who you just have to talk to. So I have a good friendship group, and then something like this, checking in with all these incredible online resources right now would be, great external resources to draw upon to really just help with the loneliness and being bored. Because one thing that is very interesting, the sort of limited research out there at the moment, is it seems that working through a screen doesn't really trigger the mirror neurons that we get when we're in people's company. So even I've made a sort of loose arrangement with my neighbor that we might have like a social distance lunch together, just so that you got that contact of someone who's actually nearby, as opposed to slightly blurred and pixelating on a screen. Then other really great external resources that I've got at the moment are I'm going on a really long walk every day, and I'm noticing that really helps. I really look forward to that now, and I've actually been able to explore large parts of Fulham where I live, which I've never seen before, and that's actually been quite fun. But I'm trying to go out walking for an hour and a half, and I'm also exercising every other day, like doing as best I can a workout that sort of rough workout that I tend to do with my personal trainer. Obviously, we can't work together now, but I'm trying to remember what that is, and I'm finding that's really helping my mental health in terms of releasing some pent up energy, knowing that I'm keeping fit, and so on. But so I've something I've noticed that this crisis has brought out is I've really enjoyed observing the ingenuity of people just out and about. Nothing to do with the government or anything, but just I really liked how some of the local businesses have been responding, who have been allowed to continue trading. I've really appreciated how many people out there have been sort of kind and considerate and looking out for each other. I think that's and I think people are looking out for each other for really good self-interested reasons, that it's in all of our interest to do that. And I've maybe had 1 or 2 people like be real, like, I don't know, for those of you who, most of you probably live in London, but you walk around, you do get the odd person sort of barging by, etc., and it's just annoying more than anything else. But in terms of those external resources, it's really up to me whether I engage in them or not. And I found that they have, we're day 4 or something, so it's day 5, something like that. It's it could be a long time to go ahead, but at the moment I'm finding it's helping. The other thing is and this is something that I found quite a few people have found useful. I'm actually only really checking the news in the morning, because I noticed that when I was sort of really on it, and it was actually making me little bit too adrenalized, and Twitter. I would avoid Twitter if you could right now. I do check it every so often, and as many of you will know, Twitter is not the UK, or the Twitter is not the general population. If you check Twitter, everyone's going to die like in the next 5 minutes. But then it brings to internal resources, and this is where I've been doing the most work with clients, because some people catastrophize, some people are taking it really well and being really cool, but there are certain things that are really worth identifying, and I'd recommend people do this if you're struggling at all. But one of the things that we have to try and do all the time anyway, just to flourish, and particularly in these restricted times, is to generate positive emotion. And I know some of you have heard me talk about these things before, but these are these interventions, I think, are some of the best ways of just giving yourself a boost each day, to lift the amount of positive emotion you're experiencing. So gratitude lists. Every morning I'm writing a gratitude list of just 3 things that I'm grateful for. And the beautiful thing about gratitude lists is, it's in a way, it's a sense of, it's honoring, and it's being just. In the objectivist sense, justice is much more about honoring the positive and the good in life than focusing on punishment. And it's good for me to be grateful for things. For example, might write down that I'm grateful for the work Razi's doing and putting these things on. It brings me value. When I write and acknowledge that gratitude, I feel better. I'm also really grateful that this has happened now and not 15 years ago, because look how amazing it is. I mean, I wish I'd bought shares in Zoom. It's amazing how easy it is to access and stay in contact with people and do things like this. You know, that I've had no problem with my broadband at all on anything, you know, and so I'm very grateful that, you know, these platforms exist. I'm very grateful for some of the great, you know, art and things that give me a boost and so on. But the key thing with gratitude lists is that they can become quite rote and transient. So you really have to work at mixing it up. Otherwise, you could every morning just write, I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful to live in London, I'm grateful for Ayn Rand, something like that. And it wears off. You have to really make effort in searching for the things you're grateful for. The next thing that generates a lot of positive emotion and really helps with sleep is, if you can, ideally do a blessings journal before you go to bed. A blessings journal is slightly different from a gratitude list. What you do with a blessings journal is you write down 3 things that went well for you that day, and crucially, why. And normally that's much easier when I have a more varied life. But at the moment, with the sort of repetition of lockdown and so on, it's proving to be a bit harder. But actually, if you really filter through your day and can identify these 3 things and why it went well, you'll often go to sleep in a much more positive mood, because you are accenting the positive, as opposed to, I don't know about you, but most people I know find that nighttime is often when the gremlins start to get into the head. So if you, then that's usually a result of being tired and sort of worn out from the day, both cognitively and physically. So if you actually write down in your blessings journal so 3 things that went well, and crucially the why is the causal connection of how you were involved in that can actually is a really great sleep aid, as well as generating positive emotion. And then the other main technique for positive emotion, particularly on your own, is to start learning how to savor. Now, if you think about savoring, how we savor food, it's a similar thing. You savor a really good memory, and what you do is you identify the best image that you associate with that memory, the most positive belief you have about yourself, and then notice the sensations in the body. And when you savor like a very positive memory, you tend to have 2 kind of reactions. You either tend to feel very calm, or you feel quite sort of energized. And I think it's a really important psychological tool to have a list of positive memories that you can savor, because they actually are very mood altering in a positive way. And you might feel you might feel pride or love or joy, etc. And you can engender these feelings by literally writing down on a piece of paper, observing it, and then really seeing what's going on in your body. And that really lifts spirits. It also lowers your heart rate, and again, helps to calm you down, and helps with sleep, basically, and puts less stress on your immune system, which again, in these times, is probably very useful. One of the most powerful positive emotion exercises you can do is what's called a gratitude visit. And a gratitude visit is usually people identify someone like an old teacher who you've lost contact with, or someone in your life who is really important to your development in a really positive way, and you've maybe never really acknowledged them. And in an ideal world, what you would do is you would write a letter to that person, and then you would meet up with them for a coffee or something, and you read out that letter. And it has a very profound impact on depression and the lifting of mood. Now, given these situations now, it's probably impossible. It's not very likely that you can do that, but maybe you could do it virtually through Zoom or something, you know. But it's that act of writing out and acknowledging the value of someone and how they've really helped you will flood you in positive emotion, which is very inspiring and gives you that energy to keep going. If we think that resilience in many ways is thinking of yourself as being able to recharge your battery at times just to get you over the line. And I'm sure there are going to be times over the next few weeks that are going to require that. So those would be like 4 things that I'd really recommend in terms of boosting positive emotion to just really help get you through. Some other internal resources to really reflect on your life and break down in certain areas that have really helped you. So, for example, looking at times in your life where you've either achieved mastery or you've been particularly assertive or effective or productive, and write them down and allow yourself to feel that pride, because then it's like, okay, I did that then. And when you identify where you've had a sense of mastery or productivity, identify what was the main characteristic that you brought to it. Was it tenacity? Was it hard work? Was it courage, etc.? And allow yourself to, again, take some of those savoring tools into that. But really write these things down, because one of the most important things about writing it down is, for those of you who sort of got more into objectivist epistemology, and this is also all across a lot of peak performance work now, and it's been around in psychology for a while, is how much we can hold in mind. And in objectivism, they call it the crow, but they talk about it all the time when discussing working memory in psychology as well, is that we can only really hold 5 to 7 things in mind. And because of that, or units, because of that, it's very hard to remember all these resources that you might want to draw upon. So that's why it's very important to write them down, because once you've written it down, it's out of working memory, it's on paper, and then you've got more space again to really reflect on things. So I really recommend making a list of all these resources for you, so that you can keep looking at it, so that you don't have to keep trying to remember them, because it's impossible to keep remembering more than, say, 7 things in mind. It just can't be done. So identifying where you've had mastery is really important, and, you know, make a list, maybe 5 to 10 things that you're really proud of and that you've really made a great effort at, and then use that as a boost to take into some of the work that you might be doing here. I know this is a great opportunity for a lot of people to try and maybe learn a new language, or do a course, or read some books, or do something that's difficult that you've always wanted to do, etc. And it's often, I find, and many people find, if you can take those prior examples you had into the new work, it makes it a lot easier. Identifying uh, positive relational figures in your life is very important. For example, last week I had two clients in a row, funnily enough, who both identified that they had very positive great aunts in their life. They're dead now, but they said that the great aunt was someone that they can tap into in their head and have a really great conversation with, to help, either with boredom or just to give them a lift. And I actually find that sometimes I have sort of imaginary conversations with my late grandmother. One of my grandmothers, if she was alive now, would be the worst person to have around. She'd be like telling us all we're going to die tomorrow. But my other grandmother, who was she was in MI6 during the war. She was really funny. She was really level-headed. She would be a great person to have a chat about this. How do you get through the boredom of this? And she would be like, I know that just in my imaginary conversations with her, I come up with great solutions. Probably with her, she would talk about making jam and chutney or something, but still, it's that positive identification of having this relational figure in my mind that gives me a boost. Very much in the same way that larger than life characters from fiction can give you a massive boost as well and help you through, what would Harold Rourke do in this situation? What would Dagny do in this situation? And so on. And that can be a very, very useful resource to draw upon as well. Then there are identifying people in your life who are nurturing. Some of you will have really lovely parents, and checking in on your parents can give you a real boost. Or you might have other family members who have been very nurturing to you and calming, because that's the relationship you've had with them throughout your life. And just even making contact with them can give you a sense of peace and calm. Who in your life have been like protector figures, and are you acknowledging them or in touch with them, or are they, maybe they're not around anymore, but again, you can use them as someone to help psychologically, just to calm you and give you a boost. And then who are the people in your life are take on a bit of a sort of an advisor role, and you trust, and stay in contact with them. And then there are, hold on, I've found another slide that might be useful for you guys. These are some components of resilience that I find really useful, and actually you might find useful. So reframing. Now, reframing is just, in many ways, just allowing yourself to see a situation from all angles without jumping to the worst case scenario. So yes, this lockdown is a pain in the ass. Yes, productivity has fallen through the floor. Yes, it may have disrupted many of your plans. Yes, you're really worried, but what could you take from this to really add value and positivity to your life? Is there any way of doing that? And allowing yourself to explore that, you might come up with something. I mean, I listened to a bit of Euron Brooks' latest podcast, and he was saying, things like maybe try and learn a new language or do a course, etc., because they're all out there now. It's so easy to do. The experience of positive emotions, well, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about savoring, gratitude lists, blessing journals, gratitude visits, etc. Participating in physical activity, the release of all those feel-good neurochemicals that you get when you exercise, essential also for good sleep. Connecting with your trusted social support. One of the most important words in that is trusted. So don't just reach out to your regular social support. Make sure it's a social support system that is something that you trust. There are definitely certain friends, or not friends, but relatives of mine that would be the worst person for me to contact, and there are other people who are great. The use of personal and authentic strengths. So one thing I suggest there is, and I've said this to people who have been around a bit longer in the group and stuff, but going to the University of Pennsylvania website and identifying your top character strengths can be very useful in determining what kind of action to take. Because the research shows that if you use your top character strengths, you can get into flow and you can be very incredibly productive. When you're using lesser or your lowest character strengths, the best you're ever going to get is relief and nothing else when you use them. So really, use this time to really take up a really solid, in-depth personal inventory, and use this as a time to really have a look at, what is my life? What do I want it to be? look at your values hierarchy. Am I living my values hierarchy? Is it possible for me to live my values hierarchy in this current situation, and so on? And then looking at optimism. But I think optimism is something that I might do a whole talk on in the future of how to get through this, because it takes up too much time. And then the final slide that I want to show you is, for some of you, this might be a useful, this is a classic textbook CBT approach, but for those of you who catastrophize, first identify when you tend to catastrophize. Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it all day, etc.? And then pick one situation where you want to challenge the catastrophic thinking and really allow yourself to go into the worst case scenario. Then allow yourself to explore the most probable scenario, and then write out the best case scenario, and then ask yourself, what action can I take for all of them? One of the reasons for writing it out is it goes back to that working memory crow capacity that we have. If you are prone to catastrophic thinking, your whole bandwidth will be completely filled up with the worst case scenario. So allow yourself to get that out, get it out on paper, and then allow yourself to then have space to what's the most probable situation, really get that out on paper, and then what's the best case scenario, and get that out on paper, so that you're freeing up your mind to be able to hold these things. Otherwise it's game over, because you will just go, not all of you, but some people will go down negative spirals that are impossible. When you get over a tipping point, very hard to come back from. So most of these interventions and things that I'm talking about here are all require work. They require hard work, but they're worth it. And just to let you know that there are other things that are really helpful as well. For example, coherent breathing, which is also known as resonant breathing, if you want to look. But coherent breathing is literally just breathing in for 5 seconds and out for 5 seconds through your nose. And when you do that, it balances both your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And I'll show you here on screen the difference that coherent breathing will bring to you. If we do this in an incoherent state, which is on the left there, if you can see that, what happens is your heart rate, when you're anxious or triggered, you can see the heart rate, what we call heart rate variance, is very all over the place. And when that happens, that sends information to the amygdala, which you can think of as the smoke alarm in your limbic system, which is where your fight, flight, and freeze and dissociation tends to happen. But you can think of your amygdala as your stress center. And if your heart rate is variance is all over the place, this tells the amygdala that you are stressed. And when you're stressed, your prefrontal cortex shrinks. It comes off, doesn't shrink physically, but it goes offline. There's decreased activity, and therefore it's much harder to come up with solutions to your situation. If you actually start to focus and do resonant breathing, only takes, you can get into a coherent state within about 5 minutes. If you just focus on breathing through your nose, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, it starts to balance the heart rate variance. And in that, it shrinks the activity in the amygdala and increases the activity in the prefrontal cortex. So literally taking 5-10 minutes out has a huge difference in your ability to reason. And when you're looking for solutions, you want your prefrontal cortex to be online, not offline. So I did a lot of this when I was trying to get everyone out of Morocco. At one point, we had the ambassador, someone working for the ambassador, called us up and told us that none of our flights were going to go, that our rescue flights were going to go the next day. And I had to make a decision about whether we were going to have to take a 4-hour drive to another airport to risk getting a flight there or not. And I had 5 people asking me questions all the time. and I was actually completely overloaded. So what I did is I went off and I just did this kind of breathing for about 20 minutes uninterrupted, and I came out and I actually was able to come up with a really neat solution. And that was purely because I had allowed myself to get into a coherent place. I could almost feel the amygdala calming down, and as the amygdala calmed down, my prefrontal cortex was able to come up. I mean, you could say the prefrontal cortex, or I was able to come up with ideas and solutions without being overwhelmed. And I'm really grateful for the fact that I had some of these techniques and that they actually work. And I just thought today it might be really great just to share some of those with you today. And then maybe, Razi, I was thinking it might be good to put it out for questions or something like that now. Because I've thrown a lot out at you. I'm very aware of that. And I could write some of these things down for you in the chat or something if people are interested. And but I thought maybe it'd be good if people wanted to throw some questions out.
Yeah, so I was going to go to Nikos first anyway, but once you showed that slide about catastrophic thinking, I really didn't have any choice because Nikos is the world champion of that. Nikos.
Thank you. So thanks so much, Josh. You know, I can't explain how much value I've got out of it. And obviously thanks to Raj for organizing this. So I have a question when you talk about savoring memories from the past, and it's also related to your point, as if having discussions with people who are not anymore here. So something that happened in Greece during the crisis, the bad days of the crisis, was a lot of people would retreat on the past. So you would see a lot of people watching old TV series or old football games. And I see this happening today as well. So I guess people are retreating to a safer and happier time. Yeah. And my question to you is, although I get why this is comfortable, and it gives you this peace of mind, at what point does it become an evasion? And at what point are you basically escaping reality, but in a way that kind of becomes unproductive? And specifically, I want to ask you about the savoring memories things.
Yeah.
So for example, my best memories, let's say romantic-wise, was from some time ago, and with a person that I know that odds are she will not be in my life again. So why is this, I'm not saying it's not good, but I'm asking, why is this a good thing in terms of I'm going to another reality which is not anymore there? So it's basically daydreaming. I mean, it's the most beautiful daydreaming, but still, when I come back to reality, it's like, well, that person is not here. Or even worse, I mean, if someone is already dead. So thank you.
It's a good question. Well, good few questions in there. One thing I didn't clarify about savoring is you've got to pick memories that aren't complicated, because what can happen is you can think, oh, that was great, and then you start triggering lots of negative memories that go along with that. So often you've got to be careful that you're picking something that's not too complicated. And then to answer the first question that you really put out there is, you know, when is it evasion? I think it's if you don't act on it. So I would be using savoring as a way of giving me an energy boost to then be able to act and do something. So I have to use it constructively. The thing about any kind of emotion, particularly positive emotions, is they're transient. So you can either just sit there and try and just make yourself feel good, or is there a purpose to me savoring? Yeah, there's a purpose for me savoring, because I actually want to get this paper written, or I want to read this book, or I want to make the awkward phone call, or I want to just I want to go and sit on the park bench and really enjoy the sunshine that we've had the last few days or something. But you're using the savoring as a tool. Yeah. Not as just as a way of escaping. That's what I would say to that. A lot of people I notice when they seek comfort, they reflect back on things actually that happened in their teenage days. So the music that tends to be the most powerful for people is what you grew up with, etc. And the reason for that is when you become a teenager, it's when you first start to really experience strong emotion. And I think that becomes hardwired. So nearly everybody thinks that the music, in general, most people think that the best music was when they were about 15, 16 and so on. But I think those are the times that people rewatch sports videos, the movies and everything, because it was a very, it's that stepping stone time in life. I was 15, I read The Fountainhead. It changed my life. It was amazing. And so there are certain scenes in The Fountainhead when I read now that I have an almost overly emotional response to, because it's not just my current day response, but it's almost like reliving what I went through when I was sort of 15, 16 as well. So to go back to your question, be careful with what you're savoring. Make sure that often it's the memories that work best don't involve other people, and particularly romantic. Romantic relationships are the hardest and most possibly the hardest and most rewarding types of relationship, but they are minefields. So I'd be careful with that. But like, better to savor a memory when you won the cup or something like that. That would be my suggestion there. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks so much. That was so useful. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Nikos, did you have a follow-up or another question?
I have 50 more questions, but let's go to the next one. So I don't want to monopolize it.
Well, there's nobody with their hand raised in the chat at the moment. There is a question by Tom. Tom, do you want to ask it live? Because I'm not sure I know at this point what it refers to, but you don't have to. If you don't want to unmute yourself, I'll take that as a no.
I don't mind. Hey, Josh.
Hey, good to see you.
Hi. So you said when you did this restful breathing when you were in Morocco and you came up with a miraculous solution to the problem, you left us all on a cliffhanger. What was the solution?
Well, okay, so the issue was, do we drop everything, try and find a minibus to take us to Marrakesh, get on the Ryanair flight, even though we've got EasyJet flights, and the solution was, hold on a sec, the Agadir airport opens at 9 in the morning. The flight from Agadir on EasyJet leaves at 1. The flight from Marrakesh was at 1:30. Actually, if we get to the airport really early with the bus, go in and check that it's going. If it's not going, we can drive straight to Marrakesh straight away and we will still catch the second flight. Now that was impossible to come up with 5 or 6 people asking me questions all the time, me stressing out about the fact that is someone going to come down with COVID in the middle of this as well, all these kind of things going on. And then am I going to get the money back? Is the travel insurance going to work? Is the bus going to be on time? And all these sorts of things, going on and on and on. It's like I was whirring round and round and round, but going and doing that breathing allowed my limbic system just to calm down enough for my more rational part of my brain to come back online, and that allowed me to generate some solutions. And the solution was, everybody was cool with that. We'll get up really early. We'll get to the airport as soon as it opens, check that the flight's is actually on the screen or not. If it's not on the screen, we go straight to Marrakesh and we'll still get the second flight. But that was impossible to come up with in the heightened, agitated state that I was in and that the other people were in. And I needed to do that resonant breathing to be able to get to a place where I could come up with that solution. Yeah. All these things require work, but they work. They require work, but they work.
Sure. That's really helpful. It's you laid out you took time to lay out all of the risks and issues and prioritize them. Not getting home was the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Obviously, cost was also, the health of your folks that you had out there was all very, very important, and you needed that time to figure out which were the priorities and how best to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was very hard. I had to get myself calm. There are certain other techniques you can do, literally putting your hand in cold water, because water it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that calms you down. And also that the coldness of the water brings you out of one state into another state, into a more present state. So there are all sorts of things you can do that if anyone's interested, if you look up DBT techniques, they can really help in just terms of stabilization and bringing you in. But they're kind of more, that's more if you're like really like stressed out or really triggered. I mean, for most people here and stuff, it's more about how do I manage getting a bit bored? How do I manage like feeling a bit depressed and down, a bit stuck, you know, these sorts of things. So that's where I do the gratitude lists and blessings journals and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's a question here. Thanks, Josh, for all the tips, from Ella. Do you have any advice for people self-isolating at home with other people? So when you're saying self-isolating, do you mean that you're not allowed to have any contact with the other people?
Hi, Josh.
Hi, Ella. Is that what did you catch what I meant? That do you have any advice for people self-isolating, as in you've got to stay in your room and not have any contact with anyone else?
Not really. I think it's applied to everyone because we're in a lockdown. So most of the time we spend at home.
Right.
And if the household have more people, then apparently the time we spend with other people increase as well. And we actually don't have anywhere else to hide. So do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, my best advice would actually be draw up some kind of contract with everyone and just agree, you know, and that even though it's not a legal contract, just hey, or you know, I need to have basically it's about asserting your boundaries. Like, what am I comfortable with and what am I not comfortable with, and does this work? And also acknowledging whose home it actually is as well, because ultimately you have to respond to that. You know, if I was at my parents' house or my mum's house, I mean, I would have to respect her wishes within that context. But just asserting your boundaries. The really important thing about boundary setting is there's two types of boundaries. There's what we call protection boundaries, where you're protecting yourself from others. So I need you not to come into my space. I need you not to be rude to me. I need you to, and so on. But then there's also what we call containment boundaries, is where you're actually protecting others from yourself. You're taking responsibility for yourself by saying, if I'm in the room with you for too long, I will probably do X, Y, and Z, and I need to let you know that. So being really open with boundaries, if it's possible, would be my sort of, I think, would be the tool that would help the best if you are struggling altogether while self-isolating. And also maybe flip it round, reframe it. Hold on a sec. Maybe this is really great that I'm with some other people, because at least I'm not completely on my own, because those people it's going to be harder for, etc. You know, you can play games with people in your house, etc.
Yeah, actually, it's a great idea. Actually, I enjoy being with other people. So actually, it's a great scenario.
Yeah, I mean, other people are of tremendous value to ourselves. That's why we really like other people are essential in our lives, because we value them so much.
Thanks.
That might be my favorite answer ever. And now we'll go back to Nikos.
Thanks. So we have someone else who wants to ask something with the previous scenario, but another question I had, Josh, is my coping mechanism specifically in the first days were to do the opposite of happy thoughts. So I would listen to podcasts. My favorite podcast show is from a guy called Jocko Willing. He's an ex-special forces guy, and quite often he reads books from wars and stories from prisoners of wars. So my first go-to thing was the episode that mostly shocked me, which was a guy who was a prisoner of war of the Japanese in the Second World War. And the thing he went through is unimaginable. And I was planning to listen then again to the episode about the Rwanda genocide, or about the concentration camps where they did like live experiments to things. Do you think this is productive? Like trying to go to, not to a better place, but try to go to a horrible place and say, oh, well, at least I appreciate what I have, and this is not that big. Or I remember reading the diary of my grandmother back in the day from the Athens when she was occupied from the Nazis, and she said, today I walked out from the room and I went out from the house and I find dead bodies on the pavement. So do you think this is productive, or do you think this is not do you think this is not such a good idea?
I think it's very productive as long as it's not the only thing that you're doing. And I think one of the most inspiring books I ever read was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And the horrors of the concentration camp, but he noticed that the people who survived were the people who were able to identify and find meaning in nearly everything that they did. And what you often find in these incredible stories is, I think it works in the same way that, like, why when you're a teenager you really respond to James Bond or something like that, is because these larger than life characters or experiences allow you to extrapolate into your own life much more easily. If this person I admire was able to do this, then I think I could probably do this within my context. So I think that's very powerful. And also, a lot of these people have experienced what we call post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is a very real phenomenon. The best analogy I ever heard about this came from, I think he's called Stephen Joseph, but he calls it the broken vase analogy, that most people can identify or know that, granny's house or your mum's or whatever, but we often see people, they have a very pretty vase, but you can see it's broken and it's been put back together with that sort of special tape that people use and or glue, etc. And you know that, okay, that's my life, or that's my experience. I can keep trying to put my life back together like a vase, or I've been through this experience and it smashed the vase. I can put it back together, but everybody knows that that vase is incredibly weak, flawed, fragile. Or you can take that vase and you can smash it up and make an amazing mosaic out of it. And that mosaic is something new that's come from the trauma, but it's its own thing, and it's its own solid thing that you can use, and it can become a beautiful, non-compromised object in itself. And that's really what post-traumatic growth is taking this horrific experience and creating something from it to use going forward. And post-traumatic growth seems to be something that most people are able to do. The only area where that seems to fall down is when people lose children. It seems that no one ever really can get over that. But in other experiences, people are, so I encourage people to look up the phenomenon of post-traumatic growth. Tedeschi and Calhoun are the main pioneering researchers on it. But I think what you're talking about, I think it's incredibly inspiring that what people can survive. And so I think there's a lot of value in doing what you're talking about. But I would be careful not to just only listen to that. Also, like, I think you could get as much inspiration from reading about Steve Jobs or something as well. Yeah, if that makes sense. But no, I think they can be incredibly valuable. Those stories. Well, they have been for me anyway.
So Josh, when we had a few days ago, we had Gloria Alvarez and Jonathan Hoenig talking about the economic implications of the pandemic. And both of them also spoke about, that their good can come out of a very bad situation. And they mentioned whether it's, challenging prevalent ideas that aren't normally being challenged, or whether it's, investing in certain stocks that might grow more than usual. How would you say, on an individual level, how maybe concretize the idea of post-traumatic growth? How would somebody now locked up at home, basically, what are our best options?
I mean, post-traumatic growth is something that takes time. It's a bit like a grief cycle. It takes a while. It's not something that you can just say, hey, I'm going to facilitate post-traumatic growth now that I'm in these next 2 weeks. But I think you need to be optimistic. You need to, I think you just need to do all these things. You need to work at it. So you have to really bring, what is it Gina Gorlin would often say? I can't remember right now, but it's you know, she would often talk about bringing reason to bear, she would say. But you need to just bring your rational mind to these situations, and what is it I think I can do right now that is going to, bear in mind, you know, something that objectivism always emphasizes is that we're long range creatures. Use this as an opportunity to project into the long term of how I might be able to thrive from this situation. And it may be, you know, for some of us, it may be really, you know, read an extra chapter for the OAC assignment or whatever it is, but just really create your values hierarchy right now as well. I think, you know, reassess that, see if it's changed in the face of adversity. I was sad to have missed that talk. I actually fell asleep, and I probably will listen to it. But yeah, I think there often are opportunities in this, and use this on an individual level to come up with your own opportunities within the context of your own life. Maybe it's just eating better and getting fit. I don't know.
Thanks. And that video is on our YouTube channel, so
great.
You can still watch it. And let's go back to Nikos.
The last question that I have, which is kind of embarrassing, because so here's the thing: when it comes to catastrophizing with stuff like, oh, I'm afraid, you know, something's gonna. Sometimes you can understand the irrationality, but what I've read these days is that a lot of people have actually something called, I think, disease phobia or something like that. I don't remember the exact title, but these people actually feel symptoms. Like in the long term, turns out they don't have the disease, but so sometimes is it possible that your body basically, quote, attacks you and makes you catastrophize? So you feel this kind of weird muscle pain. Oh, and I've read that muscle pain could lead to it. Or, yeah. Oh, I have this kind of stiff neck. Oh, is it a headache that's going to lead to that? So how can you basically, in a way, control your body from your body becoming the enemy that leads you to that downward spiral of let's say, negative thoughts?
That's a great question. We spend a lot of time, particularly within objectivist circles, focusing on introspection. Introspection, you know, the ability to go inside one's mind and analyze your thoughts, etc. But there doesn't seem to be so much emphasis on, which I think is very important, particularly what you're talking about, is this concept interoception. And interoception is the ability to notice what's going on inside your own body. Because your body is often giving you warning signs, etc., way before. And if you can catch those warning signs, you can act on it before it becomes catastrophic. So building up your interoceptive skills is actually a crucial component of working through stress. So really simply doing simple breath meditations. Look, I would suggest doing, you know, you can get all these on YouTube. Look up body scans, yoga nidra. These kind of things are great for developing your interoceptive skills. Yoga classes in general. And one of the reasons that yoga is so effective with for interoception is because it's time limited, it's time framed. So, for example, people who suffer from trauma or depression, etc., think that whatever they're stuck in is never going to end. When you go to a yoga class, you know that you're only going to be in that position for 5 seconds or 5 breaths. So you start to learn how to tolerate uncomfortable body feelings. And you've got someone there to guide you through it, etc. And that ability to start tolerating and understanding your body more and sitting in your body allows you to not to react so much. So you're learning agency, not just over the mind, but over the body. And that really helps with catastrophic thinking, etc. Because it's like, oh my God, my heart's going, you know, because if you suddenly get really anxious and your heart feeds into it, you can start getting in these loops of, oh my God, everything's going wrong. But if you have a good interoceptive capacity, it's like yeah, my heart's going really fast, but it's done that many times before. And actually I know that that will wear off quite soon. And then I can, and so on, I can start acting this way or acting that way, etc. So interoception is really crucial. And I mean, this is the mindfulness explosion of the last few years has actually been really positive. One of the issues is that it hasn't been particularly well defined, but I define mindfulness now as a genus that encapsulates introspection, interoception, and exteroception. So exteroception is just like, what can you hear in the distance? What's going on outside of you? And developing all those skills, all of those strengthen your consciousness, strengthen your ability to cope. And so that would be my practical suggestion, is to really learn about interoception and then develop your interoceptive skills, because they have a massive positive benefit across the board, not just with negative stuff, but also with positive stuff. It'll enhance your sex life. It'll enhance your appreciation of nutrition. It'll enhance so many things if you can develop good interoceptive skills as well. Is that cool?
Thanks so much. That was so useful. Not only you answered all my questions, but you've taken it a step further. So I have a whole page of like notes. So thanks so much.
My pleasure.
You've also answered all of Nikos's questions, but does anybody else have a question, either that you want to post on the chat or ideally ask live? If not, then Josh, do you have any final words you want to?
I'm just actually just some of those things that I mentioned. I'm just putting on the chat if anyone wants them, in terms of resources, etc. Has Eamon not got a question? No, I'm just putting him on the spot.
Well, I can unmute you, Eamon, if you want to say something.
I don't have a question, but I have maybe a comment. So I'll turn it into a question. I've done some of the things that you said. Sort of, exercise was a big one for me. Like actually having and it was just basically a walk for 40 minutes to an hour, and it felt like it made a difference.
Yeah.
I wonder though whether there is, so for me, like the first 2 days were the worst. So the first day I worked from home completely, and then the second day, and I wonder whether it was, my body or my mind was had its own like coping mechanism of just getting used to it. So after a couple of days, and in the first few days, I was very adamant and proactive in reaching out to people, setting up remote lunches, remote dinners. And now that I see into my future that that's like a steady thing that's going to happen every day, that like my mind has calmed down. So like I haven't like the initial shock of like your whole everything changing, your rituals, your day-to-day, my plans of like, normally I was like, Wednesdays I would go to the pub with some people, Fridays I would do this other thing. All that going away was sort of like very off-putting. And then once that went away, once I had like basically a ritual again, I've calmed down. So I'm not sure if I wasn't planning all of that. I wasn't like sort of knowing that I was gonna calm down after a couple of days, but I've sort of automatically adjusted. And now that I feel like I can do this for another couple of months in this current state.
Yeah, I mean, I had something similar. The first day where I had to do 4 one-to-one Zoom calls, at the end of that day, I was like, I can't do this. Like, yeah, it's exhausting. It's like, because it was different. Doing like one-to-ones through Zoom is like, it requires a different kind of focus and all this sort of thing. But after day 2, I was like, oh, actually, this isn't so bad. So I think there is that. The threat to one's it was like the threat to one's values were made very concrete when suddenly everything was taken away.
Yeah.
But I think if you've got resources and I found out after day 2, I was like, yeah, I can do this. It's not actually quite so. I had to go through the experience to find that it wasn't as anxiety provoking as I thought it was going to be. You know, so I would have questions like, what would I do if my client freaks out and I'm not in the room? I can't do anything. But actually, they never freaked out when they were in the room, and so on. But it was just that normalizing of it. But it's I think it's I've had a very similar experience. The first couple of days were difficult, and then it's like, yeah, I could do this. I don't want to do this, but I could do it. And I think that taking that approach makes it a little bit easier. But I'm just reflecting back what you were saying, really, aren't I?
I think I'm probably one of the lucky people where it hasn't negatively affected me that much. It was just a shock to the system, and then things flattened out pretty quickly. So it wasn't sort of, I can imagine because for me everything looks pretty certain for the next couple of weeks, but for people where they had to actually deal with new things coming up, they're the people that probably, that they'll have a harder time with it.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, so like my one-to-one business has been dented a tiny bit, but not hugely. But my Resurface business has been completely smashed out of the park. And I had a couple of days of getting used to that. But then I've had some interesting meetings with people, and it's like, okay, we're all going to focus on 2021. You're actually going to now have a really long, steady lead up to relaunching and all this sort of thing. And having that support from other people was actually really crucial for me. That's a reassurance. I mean, speaking to some people who were like, yeah, our company survived 2008. This is how we did it. I'll share this with you. Was really reassuring. But that, for me, definitely those first 2 days of like, my values have been taken away. And I don't know when they're coming back. And also don't underestimate the fact that there's an incubation period with the virus. So lots of people are like, maybe I've got it and I don't know I've got it. And so on. I personally, in relation to that, I really hope that Oxford report that came out on Wednesday is true. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I'm fascinated with the actual news, the actual details of all the different reports. But I don't want to hijack the conversation with it. But I also agree. I hope the Oxford report is true.
Yeah, definitely. It seems quite reasonable. So
it was my theory all along. So
yeah, nice. Anyone else got any questions or anything that they want to ask or put on the chat?
Well, you mentioned that after your first day of Zoom calls, you thought this is difficult. One thing I've noticed with running Zoom events as opposed to live events is that people are less inclined to ask questions on Zoom. But if any of you change your mind, there is going to be another call with Josh next Saturday. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And for the two that we have in between, this Monday with Nikos and Brendan O'Neill. And then on Wednesday, we'll advertise that with details soon.
Actually, there's one thing I want to say, Razi. It's something that actually I meant to say when Eamon was talking, is don't underestimate the impact of all the blue light from your screen all day on, that's something that I've had to get used to, is the fact that doing all these calls on Zoom, because I'm not just doing Zoom calls with my clients, but other people are checking in through Zoom and so on. I'm actually spending a lot of time in front of the screen, and that blue light does can keep you awake and it releases quite a lot of dopamine. It keeps you quite energized. And I haven't got any yet, but when I was in Morocco last month, a client showed me he wears these red lens glasses in the evening that help calm him down and are really good for sleep. So don't underestimate the impact of all this screen time. It definitely is quite stimulating, and so coming down from that can take a bit of time. And I'm going to have to start doing that because it is pretty tiring. I'm finding being on Zoom all day.
Yeah. So anybody who should limit their screen time to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays in the evening for a couple of hours for our meetups.
Yeah. And then, because on top of that, everyone's watching Netflix for the rest of the time. So it's a lot of screen time.
Netflix have reduced their speeds, so, or internet speed, so it's not as good as it used to be. But this is as good as it used to be and better. So yeah, I hope you'll all join us for our upcoming meetups. And if you can't, as I mentioned, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. If you want to contact Josh, info@resurfaceuk.com. Thanks. Bye.